Saturn into Aries, May 24th through September 1st. Trial by fire. Hello, my name is Eliane Nicole. I'm your astrologer and tarot reader, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about Saturn's transit into Aries, May 24th through September 1st, one of the weightier, more profound transits of the year. But first, I want to say, if you're watching this on Instagram, I'm just going to post the first 3 minutes here. The entire video will be available on my YouTube channel, Eliane Nicole. My YouTube channel is my name, Eliane Nicole. Please find me there. If you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure that you subscribe to my channel. Please hit the notification bell so you're notified every time I post a new video. Please like, please comment, please share. It helps me in the algorithm. It helps me to grow my channel and to grow my community and my business. And it puts me in a position to continue to give these free astrological offerings. If you are watching this on Instagram, please make sure that you are following astrology.tarot.Eliane Nicole. There's a link in the bio to book a reading with me on Instagram. And there's a link in the bio to get to my YouTube channel to watch this entire video about Saturn's very important transit in Aries for the summer of 2025. And now, without further ado, the reason that this transit is so important is because it's a trailer. It's foreshadowing something that is going to be a much more prominent storyline in our life beginning in February of 2026, going all the way to April of 2028. And so if you're a person who has, awareness and astrological knowledge, which you do because you're watching this video, you can kind of start to see this summer what is kind of sparking up that's really going to be taking a much more significant form in your life all the way from 2026 to 2028. And so Saturn is the planet. He's considered the great disciplinarian, the great authoritarian. He's called Father Karma, Father Time. And as Saturn shifts signs, there's a different meaning personally than there is for the collective. And I'd like to go talk about both of those things in this video. And then once we're talking about personally, there's 12 different ways it can go depending on which house it's in your personal chart, which is why I always encourage people to contact me for a reading. I read on Zoom, so I can read for people anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. I would love to read for you. Everyone should have their chart done at least once in their life. I believe it's something that you should continue to work with over time and get transit readings, but at least once you should have your birth chart done if you've never had it done. It's a fascinating experience and very kind of enlightening experience. Anyway, back to Saturn and Aries. So as Saturn is shifting signs, shifting houses, for the collective, it's probably a shift in, systems and structures, and maybe some of the elders in society who are now needing to pass the baton to the next generation. And in our personal lives, it could be a shift of where the weight of responsibility is in our lives. So whichever house Saturn, whichever house Pisces rules in your chart, you've had Saturn there for the past 2.5 years. As I record this video, I'm recording this video on Thursday. What's the date? May 22nd. So 2 days before Saturn enters Aries, I'm recording the video. And so Saturn is at the 29th degree of Pisces as I record this video. And he's been sitting at the 29th degree of Pisces since May 13th. And if you follow my astrology, you know that the 29th degree of any sign is considered a very critical degree, because that planet has been through every other degree of the sign. And so it holds a lot of potency, and a lot of times, because it's the last degree, it's like kind of got a feeling of like now or never, or urgency, like something has got to finish, something has got to close. And Saturn in Pisces was so much about, if we were doing our work over the past, I think it was March 2023 when he first entered. And it was so much about developing emotional maturity and cultivating our emotional intelligence, and emotional boundaries were a big part of that. A lot of tests of faith, issues with water, and the Aries energy is very, very different, and so as Saturn enters Aries, with Saturn in Aries, we are going to be working on our relationship to authority a lot. And we're also going to be working on our patience a lot. And we are going to be working on our relationship to anger. These are big Aries themes. And with Saturn and Aries, whichever sign Saturn is in is where the biggest tests and challenges are collectively. It's going to be most personal for people. Like if you have an Aries sun, moon, or rising, if you're an Aries rising, it's going to be traveling through your first house. So it's going to be very personal to you. If you are a Aries sun, it's also at some point it's going to conjunct your sun. And so, as soon as it's within a 3-degree applying orb to your sun, you may start feeling the transit coming on, and it'll peak. And these things happen over time. They're not just on the day of the exactness of the transit, but the exactness of the transit does show the climax. So it does pack an extra punch, but there's a building period, and then there's also kind of like a resolution period, so transits, if you're talking about the moon, the moon transits, they go by in a day, because the moon's moving 13 degrees a day. So it's switching signs every 2.5 days. So when astrologers are making daily predictions, they're looking at the moon. But when you're dealing with a planet like Saturn, which is one of the outer planets, it's not one of the transpersonal planets like Uranus and Neptune and Pluto that just take forever to go around the sun, so we don't even see them in every sign or experience them in every sign in a lifetime. Saturn moves around the sun in 28 to 30 years. And so Saturn is in a sign roughly every 2.5 to 3 years. So when we have a Saturn transit through a house, it's significant. It's a 2.5 to 3 year focus of, either tests or challenges or some kinds of, maturation process that's going on in the house where Saturn is traveling. Now, it's not like, it's the only thing going on in your life. Like when I do these videos, I separate planet by planet, but it's the thread of everything that create the complete tapestry of our lives. Saturn is just one thread. And a lot of times people are scared of Saturn. A lot of astrologers talk about Saturn in a bad way. I have grown to love Saturn in my lifetime. I think that there were periods where I definitely struggled with Saturn, but I have, in the past few years, really probably since 2020, in the past 5 years, I have completely transformed my relationship with Saturn. And I have Saturn in the first house. I'm a Gemini rising. I have Saturn in the first house. It's really important for me to have a healthy relationship with Saturn, and I think that developing that has been a part of my life trajectory. And my Saturn is actually very nicely placed because it's trine my Sun Uranus conjunction. But, which brings me to my point that how any planetary transit is going to affect you, and in this case specifically Saturn in Aries, really depends on how is your own personal Saturn placed in your chart. You know, if you have a challenging Saturn, then Saturn transits may be more challenging for you. If you have a very well-placed Saturn, then Saturn transits are going to be easier for you. Saturn transits are easier for people who have day charts than night charts. If you don't know if you have a day chart or a night chart, if you don't know where your natal Saturn is, again, contact me for a reading. I would love to read for you. This is such a good time to get a reading because 2025 to 2026 are game-changing years. The landscape of our lives is completely changing. We are entering a completely new era in the world and a completely new era in some area of our lives, you know, professionally, personally, relationally, financially, some neighborhoodally, you know, something new is emerging for all of us. It can't not, because that is what's happening in the world, and we all have to live in the world. So, you know, Neptune moving into Aries is also very, very closely connected with Saturn and Aries, because as Saturn moves in, he's in an applying conjunction to Neptune. They are so close all summer long, even though they aren't officially in the conjunction at 0 degrees Aries until February 2026. But they're close enough that those who have astrological awareness can see where the tides are starting to shift and take us in a new direction in our lives that is different from the old world that we're leaving behind. And look to the Aries house in your chart. 0 degrees Aries is the beginning of the entire zodiac. 29 degrees Pisces, where Saturn is hovering as I record this video on May 22nd, is the final degree of the zodiac. And we've had so much energy this year in 2025 so far with this 29th degree and the 0 degree. You know, we had in March and April, we had both a Mercury retrograde and a Venus retrograde season that straddled the Pisces Aries part of our charts. And both Venus and Mercury went over 29 degrees Pisces and 0 Aries 3 times. So they were preparing us for kind of like what's to come in a much bigger way. March and April has already been preparing us, but I feel like March and April was more preparing us on a vision level. And now Saturn is coming in to say, this is the work that has to be done. This is the foundational work that needs to be done for the new start. And Aries energy is very impatient. Aries energy wants to move fast, wants to move quickly. It's inspired. It wants to go. And Saturn is like, nope, slow down. Here are the rules. Here are the regulations. These are the documents that need to be in place. These are the contracts that need to be in place. These are the materials that need to be ordered. You know, you need to do a budget. Like Saturn is coming with all the rules. And so for many people, it's going to be like you have this new start that you want to make and it's moving slower than you'd like to because there's all of these Saturnian blocks and obstacles that you have to overcome. And so there's that aspect. So Saturn in Aries is really developing the patience muscle for a lot of us. Another way Saturn in Aries can present personally is on the anger level. Aries is ruled by Mars, the god of war. So Aries can be very confrontational. Aries can be very blunt. Aries is very like me first. I want what I want when I want it. You know, no patience, all of that. And so that can be, you know, met with, or else within yourself that can create, you know, frustration, anger, at the worst level, rage. And so this will be a period of some people for this next 2.5 years. And usually this is going to be people who are already predisposed to anger issues. So it's probably going to be people who have strong Mars in their chart or whatever, or an afflicted Mars in their chart, I should say. Anger management. This is a good time if you're a person who has a tough temper to actually enroll in some anger management classes if you have a short temper. And because then that's feeding Saturn. That's giving him something he wants, and that can soften the effects for how it's showing up in your life. Because otherwise, Saturn and Aries can represent, the consequences that come from not being able to properly contain your anger. On the other hand, for some people, Saturn and Aries may represent a kind of a depression. If Saturn goes over your moon or your sun or your rising, sometimes it can feel very heavy. It can feel weighted. Now, Saturn in Pisces is depression in and of itself. But Saturn in Aries is more of like an unexpressed anger turned inwards, And so they say, I've heard it said, I don't remember where, it was one of the teachers, that depression is anger turned inwards. And that's how I got to depression for Aries. But whereas Saturn in Pisces is very melancholic and more, just emotional. Aries is angry and rageful and I'm not saying all Aries, but Saturn in Aries, it's like trying to contain a rage, trying to contain a fire, which brings me to a geological interpretation, which is probably trouble containing fires, or issues with the containment of fires is very Saturn in Aries. Saturn in Aries over the summer looks like an oppressive heat wave over the summer. Saturn is oppression, Aries is heat. It's wanting to move fast but having to take it slow. And what else? So on a collective level, Saturn in Aries is going to, it's an oppressive military. It's an oppressive police force. Saturn in Aries is authoritarianism and possibly even fascism. But it's also resistance to authority. It's also fighting the power. So the archetype brings up both sides of the coin. Authoritarianism is going to cause the fight of the power, so you do see leadership like hunkering down, and on their, authoritarianism basically, in Saturn and Aries. And so it's going to be a year of 2 years of a lot of fighting, and you can't leave out the Neptune piece, because Neptune and Saturn are stepping in together in 2026 when Saturn is going to be there for the next 2 years. And so the story is very combined. The new start that we're making has implications that are going over the next 14, 20 years. The inspirational part of it is Neptune and Aries. That's the spark of inspiration from God, the oversoul, source, whatever you want to call it. Saturn coming in, because Neptune has the dream and the vision, and that's important, but Saturn is coming in and saying, what is the hard work that it takes? What is the level of responsibility, the level of commitment? What are the materials? What are the resources? What is it going to take to get it done? And that part is not easy, establishing the foundation. A lot of people give up in that part. And so this 2.5 years, the people who stick to it are going to be building something that's going to have a lot of staying power. The people who don't stick to it will be, probably disappointed later when Saturn comes around to the first square. You know, and so it's like, he's like, how tough are you? How much do you want this? You know, and that's what Saturn in Aries is. He's a tough coach, and he's asking, you know, just for our commitment and for our discipline. And that's how I've come to love Saturn, because I've learned what he wants, and I've learned if you give it to him, then he goes a lot easier on you. In fact, it's rewarding, you know, because Saturn is also the planet of mastery. He takes 28 years to go around the whole cycle. And so you have that opportunity to do the work and level up. And so for some people, for instance, Saturn will be coming into their 10th house, and Cancer risings, I think. Yeah. And so that could be reaching a level of mastery for those who have been doing the work. But for those who haven't been doing the work, it could be tough challenges in the workplace that come from a result of not having been disciplined and committed enough, you know? And so it can go either way. That's when people ask, is a transit good or bad? Is that good or bad? That's people's first question, you know, favorite. It's a big question, a favorite question, but it's the wrong question to ask, because nothing is good and bad. All of these spectrums are on, all of these transits are on a spectrum. All of the planets have a spectrum. All of the signs have a spectrum. All, you know, and so it's really more about reflecting on the archetype of the transit, and then how do you want to express it beautifully in your life, you know, or, you know, what's the best way to meet the moment is what it's about. And there's always a beautiful way to meet the moment, even in the toughest of times. So we're going to be learning a lot about patience, a lot about conflict resolution, and a lot about, you know, authoritarianism and fighting the power, and things of that nature. What else did I want to say? Saturn in general is about discipline, boundaries, maturity, obligations, limits, restriction, hard work, commitment, responsibility, obstacles, tests, challenges, roadblocks, gravitas, seriousness, oppression, repression, depression. Diamonds are formed under pressure. If you meet the moment, you can become a diamond. You know, it's like the fire is but yeah, for some people, they can be struggling with the confidence that it takes to make a new start with Saturn and Aries, depending on your own personal astrology. The people who are going to feel the ingress on May 24th are people who have any planets at 0 to 3 degrees Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn. And it might present itself as a test or a challenge. It might present itself as a situation where you are having to step up in responsibility, or take on a commitment, or an obligation arises that you can't, you know, that you must meet. And so, and then that's going to be a big part of your summer story. Now, if you have any planets at 0 to 3 degrees Leo or Sagittarius, this is going to be a really great transit for you, probably work related. It could be school related if you're in school. You know, it could be academic, it could be work related. It can also potentially have to do with a father or a grandfather. It could have to do with an institution that you were involved with. But you know, something is coming up where you will be maybe taking on more responsibilities, but in a very exciting way. It looks like it's something that you're very passionate about. And so it looks like kind of like things will be kind of like taking off like wildfire if you have planets at 0 to 3, Sagittarius or Leo, because it'll be as Saturn ingresses, it will be forming a trine. So that is very fortifying to your new start, very fortifying to the plans you want to make. Things are falling into place. Things are happening with ease. Enjoy it. It may not stay that way the whole time, but this is your time to move it as far forward as you can until there's a roadblock. But that's all part of the process, you know. But this is a very exciting time for you now, and so focus on that. There's passion and there's drive and there's energy to move forward, probably with work, channel all of that passion into good stuff. And Saturn in Aries, I didn't mention, is considered in its fall because Saturn is exalted in Libra. Aries is where the sun is exalted, and Saturn and the sun are opposites. And so Saturn is in its fall, and Aries, not necessarily the easiest placement for Saturn because the energies they don't get along very much. Aries represents birth and newness. Aries is the revolutionary impulse in many ways, and Saturn represents stay, tradition, the elders, maturity, you know. And so that's why I say for the collective, I do see this era being where there is, kind of like a war of the generations, the young and the new who are trying to come up, and the old guard, and the young like fighting the power of the old guard is going to be big in the next 2.5 years. But Saturn in Aries, yes, I've talked about how it has to do with authoritarianism on the one hand and resisting authority and fighting the power on the other side of the coin. Challenges with authority, trouble with authority figures, abuse of power, resisting police, military oppression, the foundational hard work that goes into making any new start, the tests or challenges that come up with any new start, challenged new starts, blocked new starts, developing your own inner authority. A lot of times when we're having external issues with authority, whether it's a parent, a boss, a professor, an institution, whatever, it has to do with some kind of angst or uncomfortability with our own inner authority. And so Saturn in Aries is definitely an opportunity to work on that, reflect on that, and work on that for us all. The challenges associated with risk are big with Saturn going through Aries. It's not the best time for risk taking when Saturn is traveling through Aries. So Saturn in Aries is also going to give consequences for being impulsive, consequences for moving too fast, consequences for being selfish and self-centered, consequences, for all of the kind of for being headstrong or for being too bossy. Saturn in Aries is going to deliver consequences for the shadow Aries behavior. There can be, the consequences of moving too fast. I talked about that. So another thing is Saturn in Aries. So Saturn defines. So Saturn in Aries is a time for defining ourselves. Aries is the self. And so we're defining ourselves in this new world that is like, you know, it's here. We're in the new world. I think most people realize it. Most people who I'm reading for, or friends, clients, family, realize like we're not in Kansas anymore. Like we're here. The astrology has been talking about it for a long time. Pluto entered Aquarius November 19th. You know, the reason that all astrologers are talking about 2025 being such a game-changing, landscape-changing year is because all of the planets are switching signs, Saturn being one of them. So this shift of Saturn into Aries is just, it's really important for a number of reasons. It's important in and of itself, and it's also important in the big picture of what's playing out in the whole sky. And, you know, yeah, this summer is a trailer. It's foreshadowing what's to come in our lives in a new start in a much bigger way, 2026 all the way into 2028. But Neptune being there tells me that this is really more of a 14-year a story unfolding. And then Pluto and Aquarius being there sextiling it is like it's a 14 to 20-year story that's unfolding, new start that we're making, you know? And so it does have further reaching reverberations, the things that we're doing this summer. A time of defining ourselves, development associated. Oh, the challenges associated with impulses. Yeah, that's going to be big over the next, over this summer for this transit. The challenges associated with impulses. Let's just stick to the summer for now. Abuse of power, surprise, surprise. Developing our patience, I talked about. The youth versus the old, I talked about. Oh, growing up too fast, you know, it could hit some children, younger people that way, depending on where Saturn is traveling through their chart. So, you know, you might want to watch that in the kids department for the children around you. But now Saturn returns. If you're having your Saturn return, so if you were born in like 96 to 99, you probably are having your Saturn return. I think there was a brief period in somewhere in there where it's in Taurus but went back to Aries. But anyway, a lot of people born in 96, most people born 96 to 99 are about to have their Saturn return. Great time for a reading. The Saturn return is when Saturn returns to the exact degree it was at the moment of your birth. And this is the big test of life. This is when you really become an adult. This is a level up moment in life. And people are having their second Saturn return more at 60. Another great time for a reading. Hopefully, if you've been doing your Saturn work since your first Saturn return, you're at a point of reaching a level of mastery by your second Saturn return. Saturn actually gets easier to deal with the older we get because we understand him more, the more and more that we mature. And that's kind of what he's teaching us all along our lives, is like how to mature, how to be a grown-up, you know, how to adult, which we all eventually have to do. No one is doing that when they're a kid, but they still have a Saturn, which is informing the kind of adult that they're going to become. So it's all really interesting, but the Saturn return is the test of life. You have to look at yourself, a time for serious adulting. So yeah, I think the last time Saturn and Neptune conjoined was in 89 or something like that. So, you know, and the last time they conjoined in Aries is thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. And that's why this is such a big, big deal for them to be entering at 0 degrees Aries hand in hand. 0 degrees Aries is such an important point. It's the very first degree of the zodiac. We are standing at the point of all possibilities right now. And, you know, there is so much opportunity for those who recognize that rather than fear the new. Another thing that I was going to say is what I love about Saturn and Aries is that, or an antidote to Saturn and Aries is martial arts. That's very Saturn and Aries, because martial arts is more than just about fighting, but there's a whole philosophy behind it that's rooted in principles and honor. And so I studied Taekwondo and Hapkido for many, many years. And it's like, the first tenet, or I don't know what you go, of self-defense is self-respect and respect for others, and so martial arts really teaches you that you want to avoid conflict altogether, but if it comes and you have to meet the moment, you're ready for it. And so when you're doing martial arts, you're always doing all of these forms and training so that, like, if you fight, you have this muscle memory where you just know how to defend yourself, because you've been doing the wax on, wax off all that time. But it also teaches you a philosophy of the mind, body, spirit alignment, and of becoming very zen, and for not responding to your impulses and not letting anger drive you. But if you're ever in a situation where you need to defend yourself, you're strong, you're confident, you're equipped, because you do know how to fight, but you don't want to fight. And so that kind of philosophy is going to be very important to adopt for us all during Saturn in Aries, because we will be dealing with other people's tempers. We will be dealing with our own issues with anger and rage. We're going to be seeing it all around in the world. And so, everybody, we're going to need healthy ways to deal with anger, process anger, respond to anger, understand anger, all of that with Saturn going through Aries. Anger management class signups are going to be going through the roof. So, what else did I want to say? I don't want to talk about all of the aspects that are happening all summer. I'll talk about one of the first ones is the sextile with Mercury. I mean, obviously I talked about the conjunction of Neptune. Well, the conjunction of Neptune I want to talk about a little bit more, which has so much to do with, on the one hand, bringing form to the dream. But on the other hand, it can dissolve certain structures in our lives to prepare for the new start that we will then need to be rebuilt. So it can go either way. Again, contact me for a reading. But the sextile to Mercury in Gemini on May 25th, it's just a sextile. It's of the nature of Venus. So it's going to be subtle, but there is an opportunity for you to gain insight onto what Saturn in Aries is here to teach you on May 25th as he sextiles with Mercury in Gemini, the planet of our intellect, at home, where he can process, where he can understand, where he knows the right questions to ask, where he, comprehends what he's listening to. Like, this is an opportunity to see what, Saturn wants to teach you during his time in Aries. And then in June, he'll be square Mercury in Gemini. And so then that is a misunderstanding in a conflict or a challenge in communication that is making us act. And it's going to be another moment of Mercury having an opportunity for us to understand what this Saturn in Aries transit is going to be about for us. And then, at the end of June, he'll trine Mercury. And so there's three big aspects to Mercury coming up with Saturn: a sextile, square, trine. And over that time, we're really having an opportunity to learn how Saturn and Aries transit is going to present in our lives, and what are the big storylines we're going to be working on, what are the tests, what are the challenges, where are we taking on more responsibilities, where are we building new foundations, where are we having a new startup. All of that's going to be revealed. On June 15th is the third and final square to Jupiter. And I want to talk about this transit because the first square to Jupiter was August 19th, and that was the mutable square. It was Jupiter and Gemini. And we had so much with the mutable squares at the end of the whole end of last 2024. The second and exact square of Jupiter and Saturn was Christmas Eve, December 24th. So from August 19th to now on June 15th when they have their third and final square. This time now they're in Cancer and Aries when they have their third and final square. So Jupiter's in a much better position. Saturn is in probably a worse position in a way, but the square, there have been structures, the shift of systems and power is what Jupiter and square Saturn promised us. And August 19th through, June 22nd. And we've seen it. I see June 15th, I'm sorry. June 15th is the square Jupiter, the third and final square. And that square is definitely going to present a challenge. And I think I'll come back and do a separate video because I'm at 40 minutes and I don't want to launch into a whole discussion on that. And there are more transits through the summer, and it's really through the transits that you get to know what that planet, what Saturn in Aries is here to teach us, is here to pull focus on as he transits that area of our chart for 2.5 years. And so thank you. Oh, and I wanted to add the Emperor. The Emperor is the tarot card that is associated with Aries, and I think it's a very Saturn and Aries card. The Emperor is the fourth card of the major arcana. Fours always have to do with structure and foundation and boundaries, and in that respect, the Emperor is a very Saturnian card. However, you see in the artwork, the ram's heads are on his, he has a stone throne, which is also very Saturnian. The ram's heads bring in the Aries, and he wears the red robe, and there's an orange sky and like yellow mountains. So all these Aries fiery colors are here. The Emperor in the tarot is about the divine masculine. And so yes, we are learning a lot about the divine masculine during these next 2.5 years. Our own inner divine masculine and how we project that into the world and what that reflects back to us in terms of the men in our lives, the authority figures in our lives, because the emperor is men. He's often associated with the husband card, but he can also be a boss. He can be a coach. He can be a world leader. He can be a judge. He can be, and sometimes the Emperor represents institutions that we're dealing with, which is why he's also very Saturnian. But he has that Martian energy too, because he's the general. He's commanding, he's very much he has a fighter energy to him. He's strong. He's the alpha male. And he is, he's wearing his armor, so he's ready for battle. He's looking you dead in the eye. He's got his crown on. He is, and so this is so much about, our relationship to leadership, our relationship to authority, our relationship to power. This is a very powerful figure. And when he's reversed in a reading, a lot of times he has to do with abuse of power, or sometimes it can have to do with emasculation too. You always have to take into consideration the whole context of the reading, the other cards that are around in the layout. Yes, the cards have meanings when they're alone, but you always have to take it in the context of, it's a holistic art, meaning you have to take in the whole. But yeah, the Emperor, I just wanted to show you the Emperor, for this reading. I want to sign off before I get to 45 minutes. God bless you if you have stuck around to the end of this reading. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you for being here. I love sharing astrology. Please contact me for a reading. I would love to read for you. The link to book a reading with me will be in the description notes under my YouTube. There's also a link to book a reading with me at my astrology.tarot.elianicole Instagram. Follow me there. Make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube. And if you would like to buy me a coffee or a tea or a croissant as a thank you for this video, you can make a donation through my Venmo link in the description notes as well. And is there anything else that I wanted to say before I go? I think that's it. Just thank you so much for joining me, sending you so much love. Enjoy.